Okay.
No, there are more people listening than you see here. They're
Well,
zooming.
apparently the Zoom is. Good morning. Good morning. We have an update about our technology. We're going to be here in person today. The presentation will be recorded and live streamed later on our YouTube. We're hoping. So that'll be the thing. Okay. All right. Good morning. We have coffee, tea, and things to go with it this morning, starting today. So that's a good move in the right direction. Welcome to Sunday Morning Forum at First Unitarian Society, Milwaukee. There's a couple of notes before we get started. Masks are optional, in case you wondered, with the expectation that individual COVID safety needs will be met. There's a basket that will be circulated. The funds received support forums at First Unitarian. The forum next Sunday, January 22nd, will welcome a speaker, the board president of the America's Black Holocaust Museum. So we'll have that. And today we welcome Heather Dubois, Executive Director, Wisconsin Public Education Network. And she'll be introduced by our host today, Ms. Joan Christopherson Schmidt. Come on up and introduce her. Hi.
Well, you're going to have to excuse me. I lost my best hearing aid and I can't hear word of the hoop anyway, but here goes. I have known this young lady for many years. Back in 2016, she was made the president of this organization. But some of the things you may not know, she holds a BA in English, a master's in African American and African Studies, and her career includes many years of teaching and outreach experience at UW-Madison and Madison College. Her commitment to local level action can be seen in her support for grassroots organizations in Sun Prairie. She serves as the co-director of the Local Action Fund, a nonprofit that runs a snack program to help address hunger for children in the Sun Prairie schools. She's co-founder and supporter of the Sun Prairie School Advocacy Team that recently helped ensure passage of a major referendum. Heather is deeply committed to protecting and improving Wisconsin's public schools, and she and her husband are proud parents of 2 students in the Sun Prairie area school district. When I last saw them, they were little tykes. I think they're in their late teens by now. But something that I will say, and you'll hear me say at the beginning of every presentation and at the end, is the importance of what she is saying. Public education is the base of our democracy. Democracy is the base of our freedom. Think about that progression. We have to protect the public schools. And now, Heather, should I try your last 2 names? Heather Dubois.
Gordon. Thank you, Miss Chris. Thank you so much for that nice introduction. Thank you for inviting me here today. Thanks to everyone who is participating virtually or watching this event after the fact. We are grateful for everyone's interest and concern about what's happening to Wisconsin students here in Milwaukee and statewide, because there are many, many challenges that require us to come together right now. And as I understand it, my charge today is to provide an overview of some of those challenges so that we can better understand them together and point you towards some of the things that folks are doing around the state to address them that hopefully you can tap into in your bigger, small ways where you live and help us to make a difference for every single kid who's attending our public schools right now. So All right, looks like. Let's try it again.
You want to try the other direction, or are you trying up and down?
Trying down, like you said, no, try up, try over, none of those.
Oh,
There we
yeah,
go.
yeah.
There, yeah. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with the group that I work with, Wisconsin Public Education Network is a loose coalition of folks all over the state who share our concerns that there are challenges we need to come together on if we want our public schools to thrive, and who know that we are only going to see the change we seek if we speak together with a stronger collective voice. There are many barriers to the success of our children right now that have been cemented in ways that seem sometimes insurmountable. But if we come together and if we do our little parts where we live in a really localized way, we know we can make a difference. And so that's the work that we try to do at our network. We are a nonpartisan and nonprofit organization that really strives to get past some of the politics and policy disputes that sometimes stand in our way of reaching common ground, and bring people together, point them towards specific things they can do where they live to make a difference. So I don't know what the magic trick was before, but was that you or me? Was it me?
Yeah, just, this is the thing, if you point it more directly at that.
Okay, but I'm
Sorry.
not, I'm really not sure what button is making it go. There we go. But now it's not going back.
You want me to just do it too?
Not really. I think I figured it out.
Okay,
It's the, no, can you go back to the start, please? I can only go, it looks like I can only go forward. All right, is that you
I just
doing
did
it or
that.
me?
I just did the last.
Okay, so let's see, sorry, everybody. Okay. Fingers crossed, I'm pushing the right button now.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. We really strive to get people organized where they live, and that looks different in every part of the state, because in some parts of the state, there are already lots of existing groups, organizations, and folks who are already really tapped into meeting kids' needs. And so in those cases, we just try to stay informed of what their concerns are, what local kids need most, so that we can amplify that out and make sure others in the state already know that. In Milwaukee, for example, you have an organization called Schools and Communities United that works closely with our network. You have lots of local parent groups, you have community schools, and many of your public schools that are tapped into the work that we're doing. And Milwaukee Public Schools is a partner district of ours, so we try to stay very well informed of the needs of Milwaukee kids and the challenges that they face. In other communities, there aren't a lot of organized groups or organizations, or maybe there was a group that got together to pass a referenda effort, but then after the election, they kind of disbanded and they don't meet regularly. We try to connect all of those people and give them tools and resources so that they can be stronger together and maximize what capacity they have to really be change makers for kids. So getting people engaged and involved at the local level, and then coming together around statewide concerns, is a huge part of what we do. And we have found that when we do it all together, it's more motivating, it inspires kind of the courage it takes to stand up in public forums, to speak out if you're unfamiliar with doing that. And it gives people the resources that they need to know that they're going into these conversations with the facts, that they have, you know, kind of the moral authority to speak with confidence about what kids really need. And they know what policy measures are really going to do kids right when they're advocating at the state level as well as at the local level. And the reason that we do this is because every single kid in every single school in every single part of the state deserves an equally excellent public education. And that statement shouldn't be debatable, it shouldn't be political, it shouldn't be controversial in any way. We should be doing our best by all the kids we serve, and we know we aren't. We know that there are many, many ways that we are creating unequal opportunities for kids, whether it's by district or by region or by type of school within a district or by type of needs that the student has. And so we're going to talk today about what some of those challenges are. And I want to stress at the beginning of this presentation that this isn't just our personal opinion of a bunch of do-gooders who love kids and want to see them thrive. It's also our constitutional charge. The state has an obligation to provide a nearly uniform or as uniform as practicable education to every kid in every public schools. And that is not a charge that the state is meeting right now. And we need to demand better as taxpayers and as people who are invested in the success of these schools. Because like Ms. Chris said, our public schools are the heart of the communities. If we're failing our kids in that way, then we're not going to see success in any other aspect of our society. And that's not okay. More importantly, the kids are not okay. They have had a heck of a couple of years here coming out of this pandemic. They have struggled through pandemic learning and not being able to have as open of access as they normally do to their teacher, their peers, and the other sort of developmental supports they need, whatever age they are. And we know this. We know that mental health challenges are on the rise. We know that some kids have fallen behind academically because of pandemic lag, as they call it. And we know that even before the pandemic, Wisconsin faced significant challenges and gaps, particularly between students of color and white students across the state and across all districts. None of this is okay, but the bottom line is it's simply never been harder to be a kid. School is hard, it is challenging, expectations are high, and resources and supports are lower than they have ever been from the state level. And it's never been harder to be an educator. Educators are stressed and burned out by all of these challenges and doing everything they can with very limited means to keep up with the needs of kids. And sometimes it's just that seems insurmountable too. So both our kids and our educators need our support, and rather than directing our support and our energy and our attention and affection toward them, many of our decision makers have treated this moment with contempt and have turned a blind eye to the needs of our kids and pulled the rug out of providing those additional supports. And that's something that should be unacceptable to us as well. So before we jump into what some of these concerns are, I just want to take a quick moment to kind of read the room. I know we have a lot of educators, retired educators, and people who are already committed to this topic in the room. So let's start by just throwing out some of the challenges that you see facing local public schools or education in general right now. What are some of the challenges you think most need to be addressed?
Trend towards privatization.
What is it? Trends toward privatization. Yes, and nowhere is that more obvious than here in Milwaukee, the birthplace of the nation's voucher programs.
In the regular public schools, all the private ones, the classes are huge.
Class sizes, yes. We have unmanageable class sizes that are well beyond what is best practice, what is best for kids in many, many districts in the state.
High rates of absenteeism.
Absenteeism and a problem of parent and family engagement in general. As we get more virtual as a society, it becomes harder and harder to connect with parents. We also have lots of language barriers in many districts too, and lots of other obstacles toward making families feel connected and like they belong in our school environments.
Conflicts between parent groups and school policies.
She said conflicts between parent groups and school policies, which seems a very polite way of describing many, many problems that we see around the state. Thank you.
The mobility of students, sometimes they are shifted between grandparents and aunts and uncles, so they move around the city.
Student mobility is huge. Did you know that here in Milwaukee, you have more homeless students than over 90% of districts in this state have students total?
Yeah.
Just let that sink in for a second. Thousands of students have unstable housing in this community, which means that they're bopping from school to school and they require special services that we sometimes aren't able to provide. And the last thing we want is kids to get lost in the cracks. So that's a huge challenge.
Healthy food programs, breakfast and lunch.
Healthy food programs, breakfast and lunch. Yes, excellent. Everybody wants to see every kid in every public school have a wonderful, delicious, healthy, nutritious meal for both breakfast and lunch preferably at no charge or expense to the family. Okay, let's take a couple more. I said 1, 2, 3, and then we'll move on.
Child poverty.
Child poverty.
Fear that's going to get worse with the new trend in the house.
Poverty and housing are very closely related, and they're also related to many of the other challenges that we face in and out of the classrooms.
I mean, political house.
Thank you. Yes, we'll just add politics to the list then.
And on buses.
What?
Busing and transportation, yes, whether you're in an urban or a rural district, we have kids who are spending hours upon hours just getting to and from school, which really disrupts both family time, learning time, and focus time. When do kids have time to be kids anymore? And what kind of opportunities are we providing them to have a fun and thriving life?
Competition for students between private schools and the public schools.
Competition for students between private and public schools, she said. Why is it that we have a system that's pitting our kids against each other, that's pitting parents against each other, that's making choice options part of the conversation that we have about what to do best by kids? Why aren't we investing our energy into just making all of the schools great? Right? It's a major challenge. Okay, one more over here and then we'll just done.
About politics, it's more directly, refusal to accept the consequences of the decisions that are being made in our Senate and House in what's happening, because right now is when the schools need a big shot of support, and that takes money, but they are considering money for schools.
So I'll summarize that as a sort of refusal of some legislators to take responsibility for the direct consequences of their own actions in policy making and in setting budgets. And specifically, we've seen that in this state in a sort of rebranding of political shenanigans that deprive public school students of resources, as you know, brags about historic funding and so on. We're going to talk a little bit more about this. Okay, one more.
Just the politicization of curriculum. And instead of providing students with the curriculum that they need to become participating members in a democratic society, there's a political sort of focus to reduce education to, reading, math, and that's it.
Politicization of curricular questions is a huge problem, not just in Wisconsin, but nationwide. We have seen people showing up at school boards all over the state demanding X, Y, or Z in terms of curricular change. We've seen attacks on equity initiatives. We've seen attacks on human growth and development curriculum, for example. Many times these are very politically charged requests that folks are making of their school boards, and who's making the decisions? Right? Is it the professionally trained educators who have the knowledge and skills they need to provide blanking on the word, like developmentally appropriate curriculum for kids, or is it community members who are outraged about some perception they have about what's currently being taught in the schools? Something we often find out is maybe may or may not be accurate. So we need to make sure that people are informed, that they are in receipt of a full and complete understanding of what actually is happening in our schools, so that we can all work together to address the real challenges that our kids are facing, and not waste our time kind of chasing these political balls all the time that are just a distraction from meeting the actual needs of kids who are in our classrooms right now. And to me, as a parent advocate, that's the most frustrating thing. When I have to go to the Capitol to testify about some crazy bill that nobody asked for because some lobbyist pushed it forward, and it doesn't respond to the needs of our kids at all. We need to get past that and really demand that we focus our policymaking and our budgeting and our everyday advocacy on meeting the real needs that real kids have right now. Because kids don't have another chance to be kids. They only get one shot to go through our schools, and if we let them down now, then that's on us. So I see that we have a very savvy room here of people who are already in full receipt of much of the, scope of these challenges. We're going to dig into them a little bit more, and I think you've anticipated a lot of the ones that we're going to cover, but then we're going to talk a little bit about what we can do about them too. So from these board disruptions to book banning, the past year has been a lot. I'm not gonna lie. It has been a lot to try to just keep up with all of these different ways that our schools are being challenged. We had a major election last year. It feels heartening to me in some ways that the people of Wisconsin chose to re-elect a governor who has a strong education background and last time put forward a very, very strong budget for Wisconsin public schools. Never mind that that budget was thrown in the garbage and replaced with one that provided $0 in state aid for the moment, but we'll get back to that. But it tells us, and polling tells us, that people support strong public schools overall. They want to see their taxes going to investing in public schools. And they want to use the resources that we have to address the gaps that are standing in the way of our kids. So let's talk a little bit about those gaps before we talk about solutions. First of all, there are actual physical gaps. I call these map gaps. It matters where you live in the state, what kind of school you're going to go to. Our state funding system is geographically determined, and different districts are allowed to spend different amounts based on arbitrary decisions that were made in 1995 by their school boards. That's part of the problem. The other part of the problem is communities that have disproportionate rates of poverty fare worse than districts that don't. And the funding formula that we have is not equitable in meeting the needs of all students. So where you live really matters. We also have very unfair legislative maps in the state, which means not everybody feels well represented by their elected officials, and not everybody feels like their voice really matters in some of those districts. And so how do we get past that sort of combination of how we allocate resources geographically, plus the question of political representation. And that's one of the challenges we really want to address. We also know that Wisconsin has the worst racial disparities of all of the 50 states. It has been dubbed the worst state in the nation to raise a Black child. The fact that anybody could know that and not work actively to undo the damage that's being caused in this state to students who are underserved by our systems is unconscionable, and we need to name that and address it in everything that we do and make sure that our lawmakers fully understand what it means in every district in the state. Both of those two things contribute to what we call opportunity gaps. The fact that we're creating unequal resources for kids depending on where they live. It's unequal access, unequal allocation of resources, and furthermore, the system is kind of perpetuated by people who are okay with the status quo as long as their own kids are okay, right? So until we get our suburban neighbors and others who care about the wider challenge of making sure that all kids' needs in all public schools are being met, we're really not going to be able to say that we've come together on these issues. We have to find a way that's fair to everybody, that doesn't just lift all boats at the same time so that the gaps get wider, but that really levels things out and makes sure that every kid has equal opportunity, not just to have the basics, but to thrive in their public schools. The funding gaps are probably the most frustrating and the most complicated, but our Wisconsin state funding formula is unfair and inequitable for many ways. I've already mentioned revenue limits. That's the way that the state controls how much districts are allowed to spend, but the state funding formula itself is also unfair and does not allocate resources equitably to every district. There are many, many ways that it's unfair. And if you want to go to our website, wisconsonnetwork.org, and check out the School Funding 101 video, you can see some experts kind of dig into why why that is and how it works. We're not gonna get into that too much today. But I can say that every single budget that I've been paying attention to since I started doing this work has only made these problems worse and not better. Unless we're actively investing in closing the gaps, every single thing we do just makes them wider. And so that is not okay. And one of the main ways that the state has invested in widening those gaps is in the way that it's advanced the massive expansion of school privatization. So right now, the way the school privatization programs are funded is entirely on the backs of the public schools. There's one pot of funding for education, and the voucher and independent charter schools get their funding first off the top, and then whatever is left goes to the public schools. So however you feel about that program, the simple fact of the simple math is that unless we find a way to make sure that the state has ample resources to fund all of the programs that it wants to fund, public students are being harmed in real time by all of these programs, and that's where the money is coming from. Finally, there are a lot of categorical aids in Wisconsin that are intended to meet the specific needs of specific type of learners. Two of those categories are special education and English language learner funding. Those are two areas where the state has really failed its children in the past couple of decades. Special education saw its very first increase in over a decade in the previous budget cycle, where it went from worst in the nation at about 26% to still worst in the nation at just under 30%. That is not okay. This state used to reimburse special education upwards of 80%. But in statutory language allows private schools that are participating in the statewide special needs voucher program to be reimbursed at 90%. We're not talking about pittance and pennies here, people. This is over $1 billion every single year that every school district in the state is spending out of its general fund to cover the actual mandated, necessary, required, essential, beautiful costs of making sure that our most vulnerable students have their needs met in the school day. That means that money is coming away from other programs, other services, other opportunities for kids. And depending what kind of district you live in and what kind of books that district has and what kind of other resources that district gets, special education alone is responsible for widening many of the gaps that we see across programming and services around the state. And that's why our main budget ask this cycle is to just fix that. We can afford to do it right now. Let's bump special education back up to 90% and make it fair for everybody. Why not? Why not? We have the money, let's do it. I'll just add that English language learner funding has also been frozen now for over a decade with 0 cents increase to that category of aid in over 10 years, despite the fact that not only is demand way up, but so are costs. And so these are costs that districts are just kind of forced to find ways in the own cracks of their budget to fund or go to referenda and ask taxpayers to raise taxes on themselves to provide other additional services for. And that's not a good way to do school finance, because not every district can afford to go to referenda all the time and keep raising taxes and raising taxes. It's not right and it's not fair. So the political gaps that you all have anticipated and mentioned are responsible for some, but not all of this, and they certainly perpetuate and make the problems worse. I mean, first of all, you've got partisanship. We are a nonpartisan and nonprofit organization, but it's very hard to be perceived as such when there are party line votes on all of these issues, and the two political parties seem very at odds and unwilling to come together on anything having to do with education or public schools. That is, as we like to say, our problem and not our fault. I'm sorry that this is the state of our world. I wish it were different, and I don't know what it's going to take to change it, but I think what it really requires is real pressure from people on their lawmakers to vote in alignment with the interests of the children they serve, not the parties they represent. So we've seen lots and lots of political shenanigans at the State House and elsewhere that really made it difficult to move good policy forward. We've seen bad bills get hearings and good bills go in the garbage. We've seen lobbyists influencing every stage of lawmaking at the state level. And again, we've seen political gerrymandering that rigs the maps in the interest of one party or another in ways that make it difficult for people to feel like their voices matter. All of those things contribute to a sort of political frustration among regular folks, a feeling that my voice doesn't matter, my vote doesn't matter, it doesn't matter if I speak out or not. And I'm here to say that that attitude will be the death of our public schools. And if we don't all say, not on our watch, are you going to silence my voice? I'm going to take advantage of every opportunity democracy affords me to speak up, to speak out, to take part in this process, to educate my community, to influence my decision makers who still represent me and the kids in our community. And if we all do that, we can get real change. But if we become complacent with this sort of politicking and get frustrated out of the game, that's where we're really going to lose. And so we need to demand better of our leaders. We need to make sure that they are informed and engaged and that they really understand the challenges at every single level of governance, whether we're talking about our school board or even at our local school leadership levels, or if we're talking about at the State House and in Washington, D.C. All of the people who are entrusted with decision-making power need to make decisions that are informed by the needs and interests of the kids that they serve. And it's on us to make sure they know what that is. If we do that, we can close the joy gaps. And this is our real goal, right? Our mountaintop goal. It's not getting more money for kids. It's not every school being beautiful and having nice resources. It's every school and every school being able to provide every kid with a great and joyful education. What we want to see is kids who are excited to go to school, who come home from school excited to share what they learned and what they did, who feel valued by their peers, by the adults in the building, by others who they come into contact with throughout their day. We want teachers who are excited to go into the school board building every morning, who feel valued and appreciated and respected in everything that they do, and who are treated and compensated like the professionals they are, and not like second-class citizens in a conversation that they shouldn't be chiming in on. These joy gaps are probably the most important because strong and thriving communities depend on strong and thriving public schools. And unless we feel happy with the service that we're providing to our kids, and unless our kids are coming out of our systems feeling like they were valued and appreciated and got something that really means something to them, why would they stay in our communities? Why would they want to invest themselves in being part of the civic structures we want them to participate in? Ms. Chris got it exactly right. Democracy depends on strong public schools. And unless we're providing these kind of most basic heart-to-heart relationships with this level of attention, we're never going to get there. So we have already enumerated, don't know what's going on there. So some of the ways that having a problem. Can you advance this one for me, please? These are supposed to come up automatically. So, I mean, there are lots and lots of ways that policy gets in the way. That was just like a big list of them. But I just want to leave you with this. English language learner funding has been described by national experts as pitiful. Our special education funding structure has been described as worst in the nation among states who fund special ed like we do. Our mental health funding is a joke, like an actual joke. We throw a few pennies into a pot of money, and even though the governor did manage to increase some of those aids, and there were some pandemic aids and so on, it's not enough, and there are not enough school psychologists and social workers across the state to meet the mental health needs of our kids, period. We also know we have the widest racial gaps in the nation, particularly between Black students and white students, and that is true across all districts. We can and must fix this. All right, it's like it's timing out on me if I don't go fast enough. Because the trends are terrible. We're over $4 billion behind where we should be when if we adjust for inflation. And we know that all of the ways that we have kind of cemented these inequities into our budgets have just made these problems worse. Most people don't know that the last budget provided $0 in spendable aid to our kids. We have heard the state and lawmakers talk about historic investments and you know, record spending for public schools. What happened was the state increased the portion that it gives to public schools without increasing the revenue limit. That just means it was a property tax cut disguised as state aid. $0 new get to kids that way. So unless we raise those revenue limits with every budget like we used to under the Tommy Thompson standard when Tommy Thompson was governor, then it's just maintaining the status quo in the guise of supporting kids, and that is absolutely not okay. Districts all over the state were forced to use their federal COVID aid, which was intended to address those specific pandemic-related needs, to fill those gaps, and they are going to referenda all over the state at record numbers to make up for it, and that is, none of that is okay, and all of it could be fixed. So I don't think that's the same slide as before. The new fiscal bureau memo just came out this week that adjusted per pupil spending for inflation and showed what we would need in the next budget to keep pace with where we were, get this, in 2020. That dollar amount is $1,510.57 per pupil per year. We used to talk about $200 per student as if that was the inflationary measure, right? How much more we need each year just to keep pace with what we spent last year. To do that this year, just to keep pace with where we were before the pandemic, we would have to add an additional $1,500 per kid. If that doesn't impart to you the magnitude of the urgency here, I don't know what does. This is absolutely insane. We are off the rails in how we have lost pace with where we used to be as a state. And in every chart that you see, you can see us just going down, down, down in the support that the state is offering to kids. And in every community in the state, you can see the way that the kids are paying the price. So where do we find hope in all of this? First thing is, all of this terrible underspending and underserving means that we have this massive surplus. Right? We have $6.9 billion just sitting in Madison unspent that some lawmakers just want to give away and throw back at people. This is money that should have been in the schools the whole time. Why are we hoarding this money? Why are we not putting this money in the schools? We need to demand that money be used where it should have been in the first place, in our public schools. We've also seen people kind of waking up out of the pandemic. Some of the inequities and disparities that we've been talking about for a long time and weren't really obvious to people seemed a little bit more obvious in that moment when it was suddenly clear to everybody, what does it mean if you don't have technology or internet at your house? What does it mean if your parents aren't able to help you with your homework after school? What does it mean if you aren't able to have a translator for the materials that you're getting from your school so you don't have those kind of supports? All of those kind of challenges that kids were facing are now a little bit more real to some people who I think are ready to join our advocacy. We have new leadership in the State House, including the Assembly and Senate Education Committees. And there's a plan already on the table that was put forward by the Blue Ribbon Commission on School Funding a few years ago that addresses all of these needs and has like actual blueprints for closing some of these gaps. We could do this today if we wanted to. And if we raise our collective voice and demand it, maybe it can happen. So next slide, please. Sorry, I really don't know why this is working. Maybe we should change the battery. So we're gonna look for the heroes. I mean, this is what Mr. Rogers always used to say, right? Like when you find yourself in a moment of crisis, don't despair, look for the people who are doing the good work. If you could just go to the next slide, please. Oh, sorry, I went too far. So the problems are complex, but the solutions are simple. We could fund the priority needs first, and all over the state, there are people who are calling for that. Even here in this neck of the woods, the good people of Mequon Thiensville have put out a budget request asking for that $1,500 per pupil. This is not a radically liberal school board, people. This is a school board that has been in the news for some of the regressive policy making that they've been accused of doing at the local level. People are waking up to these problems and are looking for ways that they can speak out. And they know that if we want to solve these problems, we need to put the dollars we have where the needs are greatest. We have listened to people all over the state at hearings, at the school board level, and so on, and we have tried our best to consolidate all of their concerns into some simple talking points that resonate with all people so that we can make those local and bring those to our decision maker. And we have loads of resources on our website, wisconsonnetwork.org/budget, that will help you kind of put this in everyday words. You do not have to be an expert to speak out on these things. You can use our stuff as like a sort of basis for sharing the concerns that you have about the challenges that you personally see in your public schools and elsewhere in your community. And you can bring those to these budget discussions. 2023 is a budget year. There are going to be budget hearings all over the state. There will be one in this region. There always is. We can show up at that. We can provide written testimony. We can make a little video of ourselves and shoot that to our lawmakers and put it on our social media. There are loads of ways that we can raise our voice in this process and demand better. But if they don't hear from us, they think we don't care. And so that is our job in this moment in this year, is to demand a budget that meets our kids' needs, that is equitable and fair, that supports professional educators, and that holds all schools receiving public funds accountable in the same ways that public schools are for meeting the needs of kids and for refusing to discriminate against them based on their needs or any other reasons. There is absolutely no excuse for doing better than our best by our kids, and we can demand that right now. So we can come together, and we invite you to join us in doing this. We have lots of opportunities to take local level action that will have a statewide impact where we live. And we invite you to get involved in this, because it's people like you who really know and understand what local kids need, who should be heard the loudest and respected the most when we enter these spaces. Not lobbyists for special interest groups, not partisans or politicians who think they know everything, but sometimes don't even take the time to find out what's happening at the school level. We need to raise our voices and make sure that they are informed and that they know what kids need. We have lots of resources on our website too that help us hold our lawmakers accountable. I invite you to look at our vote tracker page, which lets you see what bills are coming up before the state legislature, but also who lobbied for and against those bills, and then how your lawmaker voted. And so you can see whether or not the people representing you are aligned with the interests of the public education community or with the interests of the privatization lobby, because that seems to be a pretty clear split for most of the votes that we see in our state house. The time to take action is now. Like we said, our kids aren't getting any younger and they don't get a second chance. And we need to get on our soapbox and remind people that just because all of this is super partisan and political at the state house, it isn't where we live. Everybody wants all of our kids to thrive, and everybody needs to be a part of being the solution here so that we can make sure that those kids' needs are being met. We always tell elected officials, stop playing politics with our kids and do your job. That's what we need to say. So next slide, please. Oh, sorry. This QR code, if you want to point your phone camera at it, will take you to our website so you can sign up for our mailing list and get more involved in the things that we're doing. I assume that there will be a way after this presentation to share out some links and resources so that they're available with that YouTube link for the video for today's presentation. I'm happy to do that too. And I invite you, next slide, please, to join us in our upcoming events. Let's just go one more. I see we're out of time here. We've got lots of events coming up, including one here in Milwaukee next Thursday at the Hilton. The State Education Convention always holds its annual event in the convention center here, and we are holding open to the public happy hour in the Monarch Lounge on the second floor of the Hilton from 4:30 to 6 on Thursday afternoon. If you have nothing to do and you want to meet other people who are passionate about these things, come join us there. Check out the calendar section of our website for opportunities on how to get trained in delivering great testimony at a hearing, how to get involved in Public Schools Week, which is February 27 to March 3, and how to raise your voice in the spring election process and through the state budget process, because it really is going to take all of us coming together to do that. I also want all of you specifically to know that we are holding our next annual summer summit in South Milwaukee this year. And so it's right in your backyard, and we hope that you all can join us for this. This is a very affordable all-day event. It's $25 and includes lunch, and you have a full day of presentations, workshops, networking opportunities to find out what are some of these deeper challenges facing our kids and what can we do about it. I hope that you'll join us for that. It's going to be an awesome event. Registration isn't quite live yet, but will be on our website very soon. And finally, next slide, I just want to thank you all for the, you can go on to the last, there we go. Thank you all for the opportunity to talk to you today. I hope that we'll stay connected. I hope you'll join our mailing list, and I hope most of all that you will reach out to us and let us know if there are any ways that we can better support the students in Milwaukee and the students in the communities that you work with every day. So thank you for your time, and sorry I went so long.
Let me say thank you, Heather, but it's time for a tea party of our own. All of us in this room, if we all go out, write a letter, make a call, talk to the people that can change. Our governor can't do it alone. The social group can't do it alone, but we can. This is so important. If you want to preserve your democracy, if you want freedom for your children when they grow up and not be goose stepping under a dictatorship, this is the time for us all to write a letter, make a phone call, to be in protest, to keep going and saying, hey, we need to change this. We need to support our children, our public schools. We need to support the hungry. There's money there to do it. It should go to the right cause. So please be an advocate today. Just get into your marching mode and do what we need to do. We have the ability. Let's do it. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, it was.
Lovely.
Good process.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, yeah.